What's up, ladies and gentlemen of the internet? How are you guys doing? I always love that sound of the plastic coming off the watch face. But today we're gonna take an initial look at the Garmin Forerunner 745. This is a slightly smaller watch, and it does come in a variety of different colors. It's Garmin's kind of attempt at a more affordable triathlon watch. I'm not exactly sure that they nailed the affordable part of that, but we're gonna talk about that as well as all the details of the watch. And of course, I was able to get out for a few swim bikes and runs with this watch, so I'll let you know kind of what I like about it, as well as some of the stuff that I wish could be done better. Okay, bear with me for just one quick second because I do want to let you know that Garmin is not sponsoring this video. They did not send me this watch. I actually paid for this watch with my own money from the Dialed Cycling Lab, and I'll be sure to leave a link to their website below, hopefully with a small discount code, just in case some of you guys are thinking about buying this watch. And I add these disclaimers to the beginning of all of these kind of product review videos because I do think that conflicts of interest are important, and I hope that you guys take it seriously as well. And I want you guys to feel confident that these are my own opinions and they're not dictated by some sort of sponsorship agreement or anything like that. Okay, with that out of the way, let's talk about what you get when you buy the Garmin Forerunner 745. Real simple, in the box, you get the watch, you get the safety information, the instruction manual, and also Garmin's proprietary charging cable. And it's the same cable that they've actually been using for a few years now. It's not an excessive amount of stuff in the box here. So really you're just getting the bare minimum of what you need to operate this watch. And the Forerunner 745 cost $500, which is about $100 less than the suggested retail price of the Garmin 945, which is Garmin's kind of top of the line triathlon watch. But I will say this, I have been seeing a ton of deals on that 945 online recently. I'll actually be sure to link to the best price that I find in the description of this video. But it's actually getting really hard to distinguish between the prices of these two watches at this point. It's really kind of a wash, maybe just a couple of extra bucks for the 945 at this point. But the Forerunner 745 is a significantly smaller and slimmer watch. And I'm gonna try to hold myself back from comparing it to the 945 during this video review because I am planning on making a separate video just comparing those two devices. But this watch is about 43 millimeters in circumference and it has a depth of about 13 millimeters. It weighs just 47 grams, so it is a very nice, light and slim and thin watch. The display itself is a 1.2 inch, a 240 by 240 pixel color display, and the lens is made of Gorilla Glass, so it should resist against scratches and things like that. That being said, I'll link below to some screen protectors that I actually suggest at this point. I typically didn't use screen protectors on my watches until I got this really small scratch on my Garmin 945. And it wasn't super annoying or super noticeable, but what happened was I ended up covering it up with one of these screen protectors, and it actually made the glass appear a lot cleaner. Anyway, now I suggest those kind of screen protectors on all of the watches that don't have anything crazy like a sapphire lens on them. So most of these lenses that have Gorilla Glass, I'll go ahead and suggest getting one of those lens covers. And I think it's worth it now that those things are super cheap. So as far as battery life goes, You can expect to get about 1 week of battery life when you're just kind of using this in a smartwatch mode. And you can expect to get about 6 hours when you're using GPS mode and music. So these numbers line up with about half the size of that 945. And in GPS mode without music, the claimed battery life is 16 hours. So if you're thinking about doing an Ironman distance triathlon, you'll need to be a little bit cautious here. You have 17 hours to finish an Ironman distance triathlon. So this watch is getting pretty close to that time limit. Now this watch comes with a barometric altimeter, it comes with a compass, it has a gyroscope built in, as well as an accelerometer and a thermometer. And I find the thermometer super helpful when I'm actually out at the lake and I want to test the temperature of the water. I just love knowing the actual water temperature, either before I start swimming or even afterwards, just to kind of post it to friends. But this watch also has Bluetooth connectivity as well as Ant Plus and Wi-Fi. So your watch can actually upload your workouts to Garmin Connect without going ahead and having to sync to your smartphone. As far as heart rate monitor goes, this watch actually has a built-in optical wrist-based heart rate monitor. It also has something called a pulse ox sensor, which is kind of built into the heart rate monitor, but it's the green light that's built into the heart rate monitor. And the pulse ox sensor just measures your blood oxygen saturation level. You might have seen that if you've ever, been to the hospital or someplace like that and they do a little clip on your finger. But basically, it's measuring that blood oxygen saturation level, and it might be handy if you are acclimatizing to altitude or something like that. That's potentially when you might see a dip in your blood oxygen saturation level. And I took this watch, as well as the Polar Vantage V2, the Polar Grit X, and the Garmin 945 for a run through some neighborhoods and then into some pretty hilly trails where I knew my heart rate would kind of have some variability. And I didn't see any real issues with really any of these optical wrist-based heart rate monitors. And that's on my particular skin tone. Different skin tones can have different variability with different types of colors that are used with different heart rate monitors, especially the optical heart rate monitors. But I always tell people that they should potentially use a chest strap heart rate monitor, especially if they're basing their training program or their workouts specifically rely on that heart rate data. Now, when I looked at the GPS files, comparing all of these watches, and I look at the neighborhood route that I took, I really see that the Garmin 745 and the Polar Grit X kind of show the most accurate lines with what I actually took going around these two turns. And those are the purple and the green lines. Now, when I took all of these watches through that thicker forest area, the trip was basically kind of an out and back. And here is where I think the Garmin 745 is really the clear winner. Okay, let's quickly talk about some of the key features of this watch. And I don't want to go over everything because there is a ton of different features on this watch. But this watch now does provide something called their suggested workouts. It does this once per day, and you tend to see it when you kind of start up an activity. So that might be a suggestion to do something like base training, or it could be something like a sprint workout or kind of a high intensity workout. And this watch does give you the option for a ton of different activity types. So you can obviously, swim, bike, and run, but you can also select stuff like cross-country skiing or stand-up paddle boarding. There's a swim run option for any of you guys that are into that new race type. I'm super curious about it. But a new activity type that is specific to this watch is called track run. And basically, this would be where you would take this watch and you would take it to the track. You actually do need to run a few laps just to calibrate the watch, and then just kind of tell it which lane you're using. And so if you are familiar with wearing a GPS watch, while you're doing a track workout or just even running around the track, you'll probably know that it is a bit of a mess. It ends up just sometimes looking like a whole bunch of little squiggly lines, but this mode should help provide more accurate distances when you're actually doing these track workouts. So suggested workout and the track workout feature are new to this Garmin watch specifically. However, I do expect some sort of firmware update to the Phoenix watches and the 945 watches, and I expect them to kind of push these particular software updates onto those watches as well. But this watch does have a ton of other features that are definitely worth mentioning, and they're features that you'll tend to see specifically on Garmin's higher end watches. There's something called Garmin Music. You can use Spotify or Amazon Music now. You can actually have music on the watch itself, connect Bluetooth headphones to the watch, and listen to music without carrying anything else. There's also something called Garmin Pay, which just means that you can actually pay for stuff with your watch without having to bring a credit card or a wallet or anything like that. It uses secure NFC, which just means near field communication, but it only works if your bank is one of the participating banks. So if this is a feature that's kind of a deal breaker for you, I would double check those particular participating banks, and I'll be sure to leave that below in the description of this video as well, just so you can check on that and see if your bank is one of the providers. Now this watch does provide running dynamics, which is a lot of different metrics. Think of it like you would be able to know your running cadence, your running stride length, also really cool metrics like ground contact time and your balance. So pretty cool feature there, and it is on a lot of the nicer running watches that Garmin provides. Now the 745 also has a feature called the Garmin Coach, which can provide you with a guided training plan, and it's typically kind of designed for beginner runners. And lastly, I think it's worth mentioning that this watch has Garmin Connect IQ on it. And that's one of the things that almost all of Garmin's kind of modern watches has at this point. But I think it's one of those distinguishing factors when you're comparing it to other companies. And Garmin Connect IQ is just Garmin's third-party app store. So it really does allow for a lot of customization of your watch, as well as a whole bunch of advanced features. Now I'm probably just scratching the surface as to what kind of things this watch can do. I'm definitely missing out on a whole bunch of stuff. There's a ton of other features of this watch, like training status, for example, estimated VO2 max. I know a lot of us love to kind of compare values with that. Running pace predictor times. You know, I don't necessarily put a whole bunch of value in these things, but they're super fun to look at. So many features in this watch. But my favorite thing about this watch is the simple fact that it's a reliable tracker for swimming, biking, and running. It has Wi-Fi, so I don't have to think about loading this data onto my phone and then loading it onto Garmin Connect and then loading that data onto Strava or something like that. As soon as I get Wi-Fi access, it just sends my activity to Garmin Connect and that gets forwarded onto Strava. And the watch has Ant Plus and Bluetooth, so it works with all of my biking gear, not just some of my biking gear. It seems to pair pretty easily. You know, I love that Garmin Varia radar. So this watch can pair to that, and I can actually see traffic data right on the watch. It's really actually hard to distinguish between this watch and the Garmin 945. And I know I said I wasn't gonna really kind of compare these two, but it seems to me like the 945 really is one of my favorite watches, and this one does pretty much all of the things that that watch does. But it's definitely not the exact same watch. This watch lacks onboard mapping. It still does provide you with kind of a breadcrumb style navigation, but you don't get kind of true mapping functionality like you have on some of Garmin's other high-end watches. You won't see like street names or anything like that on this particular watch. And while this watch has Garmin Music, you really only have about half the storage space to store your podcasts or your music, you know, those things that you would store on the actual device itself. And the other big trade-off when you're picking this watch over, you know, some other multi-sport watch is that battery life. So if you are used to getting 2 weeks, you're probably gonna find this watch a little bit annoying. And if you're doing long distance triathlons, you're probably gonna wanna make some adjustments to the watch just to extend the battery life just a little bit, just to be on the safe side when you're going ultra long. So overall, I wouldn't necessarily describe this watch as an affordable triathlon watch from Garmin. It's $500, and I would still love to see someone on the marketplace just make some sort of entry-level triathlon watch. I would hope for it to be somewhere under that $300 mark. Secondly, really ultimately with this watch, I feel like it's a mini 945. And they really should have thought about that and even called it maybe the 945S for small. And I think it's gonna appeal to people who want that smaller form factor. And for that smaller form factor, the watch is sacrificing, those few features and really that battery life. But it does everything that you want from a triathlon watch. And overall, I really do like this watch. All right, guys, if you are into this sort of stuff, and that would be swimming, biking, or running, definitely consider subscribing. There's also a little notification down here somewhere as well. That just allows you to be notified of whenever I post new videos. I suggest switching that to all, and I typically post videos about once per week. And because this watch is so similar to the 945, I'm gonna leave some links to some of the reviews that I've made on the 945, one of which is me having worn it after 100 days and then reviewing it. So as always, I really do appreciate you guys taking the time to watch any of these videos, and we will see you guys on the next one.